On a fair die, each face has an equal likelihood of being rolled. But we know if we roll the die 6 times, that doesn't guarantee we'll get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6. That's because probabilities are not guarantees. But what if I told you this concept applies to every organism that has ever lived on this planet and every organism that ever will live? That's the topic of today's video. This is a continuation of the Simulating Evolution series, where I'm teaching myself JavaScript by building an evolution simulator. This video will cover what is genetic drift and how we are simulating it. The most simple explanation of drift is that drift represents randomness in the gene pool. If you'll remember in this series, we are looking at evolution as the change in allele frequencies over generations. So if we have this example population with 60% red individuals, so 0.6, and 40% blue allele individuals, so we'll put a 0.4 here, we know that in the next generation, there is a 60% probability that the individual will have the red allele and a 40% probability that the individual will have the blue allele. But remember, probabilities are not guarantees. There will be natural fluctuations in these frequencies purely through random chance alone. So let's actually look at our evolution simulator to understand how drift operates. So right now we are starting with a population that has 2 alleles. One is P, one is Q, and they both have equal frequencies. So half the population is P, half the population is Q. If we have 50,000 individuals in the population and we simulate this population for 50 generations, what we see is not that much difference. Right, from generation to generation, each of these circles represents a new generation. There isn't that much change in the frequency of P. In fact, after 50 generations, we see the frequency of P is now 0.488. So it decreased slightly. But over many, many generations, let's do 500 generations, we may see these deviations start to compound over time. Now, these differences are minor, right? This is the compounding of a difference of a fraction of a percent every generation. And we can see that even when it increases, here it was about 60-40, right? Similar to our example population. We saw that drift eventually brought it back down towards 0.5. This is because, again, it's just random processes. But what happens when we have a small population? So I reset the graph to when it was 50,000 individuals and 50 generations. Again, we're starting at the 0.5. All we're going to do is we're going to change the population size. So instead of 50,000 individuals, let's make it 500 individuals. What do we expect to see? Well, we see considerably more variation. In fact, if we rerun this simulation multiple times, what we see is that every single time, the results are a little bit unpredictable. This is because the effects of random sampling are greater when fewer samples are being pulled. This is the same concept as why you can roll a die 6 times and get 3 1s, 2 2s, and 1 4, right? It's because probabilities are not guarantees. So with small sample sizes, so like rolling the die 6 times, we can expect more variation because the cumulative effects of sampling thousands of times account for this variation. To bring that back to our dice example, yes, if you roll the dice 6 times, you may get the 3 3s, 2 2s, and a 4. But if you roll the dice 6,000 times, you would very likely reach roughly equal proportions, about 1,000 rolls in each of the entire sample set. So again, drift is representing the randomness of evolution, and it is directly tied to the size of the population. Now, this is a fact we'll cover in more videos. I have a couple planned on extinction vortexes and inbreeding depression, but now I want to transition the rest of this video to how we are simulating this in our JavaScript evolution simulator. Remember, we are simulating a hypothetical population under Hardy Weinberg. So all we're doing is calculating a random number between 0 and 1, and if it is less than our value of p, which is the frequency of the p allele, then we are going to say the value in the next generation will be p. So if it's 0.6, if it's over here, it is p, and if it is greater than 0.6, then we say it is q. Now remember, under Hardy Weinberg, we assume an infinite population size. So in the same way that if we rolled an infinite number of dice, we would have 1/6 would be 1, 1/6 would be 2, 1/6 would be 3, etc., etc. Here we are saying that, well, if we calculated this number randomly an infinite number of times, 60% of the time, it would be below 0.6, or equal to or below 0.6, and then roughly 40% of the times it would be above 0.6. So that is what we are simulating here. But now we're adding in population size. So we are violating the assumptions of Hardy Weinberg. Instead of assuming that we are simulating this population an infinite number of times, instead we are calculating we're calculating this random number for every n. So n being the size of the population. N is a common way we denote this. So we are randomly generating a number between 0 and 1 for every individual in the population. And that is done in this bit of code here. All it's doing is a simple for loop. So for every individual in the population, randomly generate a random number, compare it to our value of p, and then return either a 0 or a 1. Ones indicate that it is p, it's true, and then 0 indicates our value of q, so it is false. And then to actually get our value of p in the next generation, we just take the average of all of those zeros and ones. And just so we can connect it back to the simulator, again, at every generation, we are generating a random number for every individual in the population, for every value of n. So n start is here, 500. So at the first generation, we are going to generate a random number 500 times and compare it to p and q 500 times. The next generation, we'll do it again, but we will use the value of p that was generated in the previous generation. So this is how compounding effects can occur, right? Because we're taking that value from the previous generation. Before I let you go, there are a couple things I do want to mention. One is that I will be addressing the differences between effective population size and actual population size in a future video. Another is that we will be paying more attention to diploidy versus haploidy and incorporating all of that, again, in future videos. Right now, we are setting down the very basic groundwork for the simulator, and in each update video, we will incorporate more and more elements. So in the next video, we're actually going to cover natural selection because it's already implemented in the simulator. But I'll be spending some time to improve the visuals so that when I'm showing you the simulator, it'll just look nicer. After that video, I'm still deciding what I want to focus on. Depends on how easy it is to implement into the simulator, and also just, timing and making it interesting. There are concepts I know I will cover eventually. So extinction vortexes and how changing population sizes can influence populations. I'm going to add in gene flow and multiple population simulations in concert, and then just general visualization improvements, as well as the creation of scenarios. So right now we're building up the simulator, but in every single episode, I just want to cover one topic very, very briefly, very succinctly, very plainly, and then discuss how we're simulated, and then give you these little bitty updates as well. So that is going to be the video structure for this series. I appreciate all the love that you give it, and if you give it any shares, likes, subscribes, all the things that YouTubers tell you to do, that is greatly appreciated. And anything that I am trying to promote at the moment will be down in the description. So thank you for learning adventurously, and have a wonderful day.